The thing is spinning. Okay, it
Yeah,
says we're
we're
live.
live. Let's
Hey,
do it
everybody.
live.
Oh, hi.
Hey, what's up?
All right, so it's going to be the end of January finally, and now we're getting into the
Very-
rainy, cold, annoying part of the year. Yay.
Yeah, very last day. I just got my new computer set up, and I'm like installing everything that used to be on my other computer, and that's a big part of the reason why I haven't uploaded. But yeah, I'm writing like 4 essays. God damn it! Hold on.
All right. So anyways, today we're going to be replying to a video by... I don't have the video title, or don't have the creator in front of me.
Got a notification on my phone, so my music player started playing. That's just something regular viewers of this stream should expect by now. Anyway, the title of the video is Why Arguments for Taxation is Theft Fail. Gotta love that.
Yeah, we're not... It's...
Gotta love that clunky, awkward phrasing. And it was uploaded by Armchair Culture Warrior.
Yeah, that's the guy. Now, fun thing about Armchair Culture Warrior, he sounds exactly how he looks.
Armchair Culture Warrior. Yeah, just the name of that channel. The first time I saw it, I rolled my eyes and was like, oh, good God. But yeah, this is a 39-minute video of somebody making the same Pratt long debunked talking points, but using a lot of philosophical jargon and trying to confuse people with a lot of these multi-chain arguments which have more than one chain in their logical progression as to seem more sophisticated. So that he carries the veneer of having a sophisticated argument. So, in other words, he's a pseudo-intellectual. It's a simple way of putting that. I mean, it's not very nice, but I can't think of another way to describe it.
Honestly, these kinds of people annoy me in argumentation, where they try to dazzle you with their being able to blithely use rhetoric and jargon, and half of it you can understand and you can kind of get what they're getting at, but it's also very confusing, and the whole point is just to set you up for, you don't know what this means? Well, let me explain it to you, libtard. It's a very condescending way of argumentation, and quite frankly, I'm tired of it.
God damn it! I should have named myself for the stream Eso the Libtard, because this is, as you could also probably tell by the name, one of the kind of people who would say something along the lines of, "Listen here, libtard. I heard from InfoWars that Mexicans are sneaking gays into NASCAR." But yeah, just the reason why the name Armchair Culture Warrior it was a red flag to me right away is because the concept of the culture war and being a culture warrior itself implies that you are somebody who sees culture as something that's political, something which is imposed from the top down onto society, as opposed to people who aren't clowns who argue that culture is an emergent property which comes out of social organization. And
This is something I've tried to argue myself, is that culture is a product of civil society, not the state. In that you can have culturally conservative values, you can have culturally liberal values, but still be politically libertarian. I'm a perfect example for this. I still have conservative values, but I'm succinctly libertarian in that I don't want to be taxed or to be regulated, or I want to be able to conduct business freely without coercion, and that we can all agree on.
Well, the problem that this creates, which I was getting into, is that people who see culture this way tend to have a very twisted view of how societies are organized. This structuralist argument, it sort of like people who argue this position, you're gonna see what I'm talking about when we start watching the video, but why I'm talking about this is sort of the underlying point of contention, I think, which makes up a lot of this person's the problems with their arguments. That this sort of presupposition that culture is imposed from the top down, that tends to lead people into thinking that culture is something which exists separate from society, which is ironic because those people are the very same kinds who strawman methodological individualists and libertarians for being atomists, when their very philosophy implies that culture is something which is separate from social organization and is antagonistic to individuals. But yeah, so people like this tend to see the state as something which can create culture and something which can provide cultural values to a society. And that's that's not explicitly an argument which he makes in this video, but that is sort of, you'll see what I'm talking about. That's kind of the position which informs his view of contract and consent. And I don't know. Do you have anything to say, Filthy or Night Watchman?
I don't really have anything to say except to remark that we should also make at least some passing remarks on that. UK has officially left the European Union. I mean, that they sure took their sweet time, but it's about 4 years.
Finally,
it took 3 years, but yeah, freaking finally.
In those, it's 3.5 years, but in those 3.5 years, they made all these trade arrangements with these international cartels and the United States government, and they also created local legislation imposed by the United Kingdom government, which basically it makes the United Kingdom's economy virtually identical to the way that it was while it was a part of the European Union. But yeah, most people aren't going to see that now. Also, there's strong evidence that suggests that the coronavirus was manufactured by the Chinese government, and Lebanon appears to be becoming a hollow state as we speak. Their economy, their central bank just collapsed, and they're creating a subversive economy centered around Bitcoin.
I wouldn't be surprised if how Lebanon went bankrupt blowing all their money on missiles.
So I'll probably end up making a sort of news video about the coronavirus once I get all my equipment set up. But in the meantime, yeah. So does anyone else have anything to say before we start?
Not really. I was kind of just ready to start. So
all right,
we're gonna do the usual thing where we play it through your mic because for some reason that's the only way that our audience can actually hear what's being played. I already have the thing on my end muted, so yeah, it should be fine. Now you all have the links, and one of you is not in the theater thing.
I'm in the watch together, so it must be Night Watchman.
Yeah, Night Watchman. Yeah, I sent you the link, so you should be able to get in.
Share screen?
No, watch together.
Watch together?
Yeah.
Hang on.
Check your DMs.
Okay. Hang on. Watch together. There we go.
All right, there we go. All right.
I have my mic ready.
I'm ready to.
There we go. All right, so let's begin.
An exercise in philosophical thinking. That's rich. Like this guy thinks he's a serious philosopher.
Yeah, that's the
I-
main. That's the
I
main
can't
reason that
I
this.
can't hear it.
Okay, well, that's the main reason that this video, like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. The main reason this video pisses me off, like
As
this.
opposed to a source of knowledge. So
Yeah.
wait, it's not for learning?
Yeah, this guy is so high on his own farts. It's really annoying.
The arguments made may be flawed or unoriginal. I mean, it's good that he at least has that amount of self-awareness, but
Because I mean, this is something
Or, no, he's
libertarians
trying
have
to
been.
be
This
smart
is
ass.
something libertarians have been dealing with for like going on 200 years now. Actually, a little over 200 years, and it's something which has been refuted over and over and over. It's kind of sad that people even think that they're making original arguments at this point. Anyway, let's go on.
all right.
I'm not hearing anything on my end. That's the problem.
He is so deadpan in his delivery. I'm just falling asleep right as soon as
He's
he
not
started
saying
talking.
anything though.
Oh well,
Yeah.
he just started talking on my end.
My video is behind yours for some fucking reason, so
Hello there. That taxation is that
yeah, the audio just started playing on my end.
that the argument fails to justify the conclusion.
That's because we live in three completely different states. We have three. We
All right,
The video is
stop,
coming on 3 different servers. That's
Bro,
probably what's causing the delay.
stop. Play the video again.
Hello there. In this video, I'm going to be analyzing an argument for the common libertarian claim that taxation is theft. And I'm going to be arguing that the argument fails to justify the conclusion, namely because it relies on a highly controversial assumption, which itself is not justified. So before I get into it, I just want to give a little bit of background. There was a time in which it seemed like the disputes between libertarians and so-called statists dominated the culture wars. I believe it was sometime during the Obama years.
It really wasn't. I mean, I was pretty active during the times when the Tea Party was at its zenith, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, and this is, of course, anecdotal, but I think it's a decent observation nonetheless, that no, the argument was not that taxation is theft. The argument is that our tax dollars go to things that we don't like, for example, Obamacare.
Yeah, I think he's talking about the Tea Party versus the Occupy movement, which the funny thing about those, as I've pointed out, is that neither of them, they ended up becoming, well, Occupy ended up becoming basically a Marxist, neo-Marxist movement, and the Tea Party movement became like a boomerite, conservative Republican movement. But the Tea Party movement originally was a protest movement designed to dispute the findings of the 9/11 Commission report. And it's called the Tea Party movement because it started officially with the movement pushing a giant copy of the 9/11 Commission report into the Boston Harbor in November of 2006. And the Occupy movement was originally a protest movement designed to criticize the Obama bailouts to the banks following the 2008 financial crisis. So both of those had nothing to do with statism or libertarianism. In fact, one could argue both of them were compatible with libertarianism at one point. But overall, taxation is theft was never an argument. But I would say that libertarianism is not really necessarily a cultural value, but that argument is relevant today. I think because of things like Bitcoin and crypto anarchism gaining mainstream prominence, and a lot of people seeing these as the only means by which they can make a living in many places. It's becoming a relevant issue.
And I remember even during the time, but you can even see it today, people look back on the Tea Party, it's like, oh, they were just anarchists. That was something that the media was trying to push for, to try to demonize the Tea Party. It was obviously not true. Anyone who even went to one Tea Party event could tell you that that's not the case. Not that that would be a bad thing at all, because after all, we are anarchists. But
there's a video of a guy going to a Tea Party protest on YouTube, holding an anarcho-capitalist flag, talking about anti-statism, and all the boomers, like, they were people who were like, they looked like they were in their mid-50s, early 60s, so boomer would be an accurate description. Like, literally the baby boomer generation. These people all turned at him and told him to shut up and booed him. The people who were like waving these Gadsden flags around him.
that sounds about right. And what was it that I did a video like a year ago or something, replying to that Family Guy episode about the Tea Party, where they tried to say that the Tea Party were anarchists.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Like, that's the funniest episode of Family Guy in years, but not for the reason that the show was intending.
I mean, it's been a while since Family Guy was funny.
Like, first 3 seasons, then everything after that was just trash.
Exactly.
The Simpsons lasted a lot longer than that. That's embarrassing. But anyways, let's continue.
However, we don't seem to be there anymore. These days, it seems like the culture wars is dominated by issues regarding race and gender, and social justice more generally. But I think it's worth getting back into some of these issues, especially because there are a lot of government programs being proposed these days: universal health care, free college, that sort of thing. And a common objective.
Free? It's not free. Someone's always paying for that.
Your mic is loud as fuck.
Wait.
I have no idea whether or not it's coming through on my end, but it's like twice as loud as the video, at least.
Oh, is this good?
Yeah, it should be. But anyway, what was being said?
I'm saying that's Rich how he says free college, free healthcare. It's not free because someone's still paying for it. And you know how it's paid for? Taxes. That is taxes from the government. They take it from someone else and give it to pay for your healthcare. It's a scam.
Very much so. And it's basically bribery. It's bribery. That's what it is.
No, I wouldn't say bribery. I would say it's forced redistribution of money.
No. I mean, yes, that is true. But when I mean bribery, I mean they're trying to. You have politicians trying to use this in order to get people to vote for them. Oh, I like Bernie Sanders because he's giving me free potatoes. I like Elizabeth Cherokee Warren because she promises me to give me free marshmallows.
I like Chinese man because he gives me money.
I'm the Burning Man. Come with me, kids. I have free candy.
I mean,
Grug join Grug gang. Grug get 1,000 rock a month.
Grug. Oh, Grug should be a meme.
It is.
it is a meme. Where have you been?
Oh, I've been working. Sorry.
It's all right. But anyways, yeah, I think what's his name? Andrew Yang is democracy in its final form. Not like late stage, but this is like the end, where politicians are basically promising people free money if they vote for them. Obviously, it's not free, someone else pays for it. But you have the problem that Henry Hazlitt talks about, where you have the visible costs, or the visible benefits, but the invisible costs.
Grug cave. Why Grug cave rent go up 1,000 rock?
They see a man offering them $500 generously, but they don't see the fact that he pickpocketed that $500 out of their wallet.
Grug need Grug cartel to hit Grug landlord for raising rock rent.
But yeah, this idea that you're going to get that politicians can simply promise free stuff is absolutely absurd, and probably one of the most prominent fallacies in our society today. So shame on this guy, shame on the armchair culture warrior for even unironically putting this forward as though it were something that's actually happening.
It also, I'm kind of surprised a lot of libertarians don't point this out, but this entire, like, the way that this argument is structured is based around a bait and switch. It assumes fundamentally that if the government isn't providing a service, then fundamentally you aren't entitled to it. The problem with that, first of all, is one, that assumes that if the government is running a service, that they have to give it to you, and there's nothing stopping them from letting you use it. And the problems with that are economic, and simply that it doesn't matter what the law is. The government can simply refuse to not do anything for you, and there's nothing you can do about it. The Alfie Evans story is a great case of that. Is a great example of that. The NHS just in general, where they not only don't do anything for people who are sick and need treatment, but they in many cases go out of their way to deliberately try and kill patients just to save resources. But
Even
Then
even
why do
then,
you
like
get
the
all these
Alfie,
reports of the NHS, of people actually liking the NHS?
well, because the NHS in the UK is basically their state religion.
But if you look at what's economically possible with a model which is based around rationing a central pile of resources which are collected, and you look at the incentives created by the fact that resources are collected through coercive means, it's no surprise why state services always end up doing the exact opposite of what you want them to do, because that's basically the only thing that they can do and are incentivized to do. Now, the other problem with this argument and why it's a bait and switch is because it assumes that one argument is suggesting that you shouldn't have the service which they're claiming is provided by the state, and the only way that you can have it is if you go through the state. When in reality, the focus of the discussion is whether or not coercion should be used to entitle you to someone else's labor.
Of course, all resources, whether it be healthcare, whether it be food, whether it be shelter, whether it be any sort of conceivable good or service that the government could monopolize and quote unquote provide to you for free is someone's going to have to work for it. Someone's going to have to dig it up. Someone's going to have to process it. It's going to have to be manufactured. And the only reason that people provide to you at all is because they get something out of it. If the government monopolizes it and says that you have an entitlement to it, it means that you are entitled to another person's labor, and any sort of labor that goes into the creation of that good or service and it's providing to you is any means that you have. I'm losing my train of thought here. Basically, you own the people who make it, and that is slavery.
And so the real discussion, what I was getting to, is that if they were intellectually honest, the real argument would be cooperation versus coercion. Are you given something and through cooperative means, or do you obtain it through forcing someone else to give it to you? And of course, they're going to try and obscure that through this euphemistic bullshit, because obviously that makes them sound evil if they're going to openly argue that someone else should be forced to give them something because they want it.
Yeah, so anyways, let's continue.
Is that, well, they rely on taxation, and taxation is theft. So in order to know whether we should support or oppose these policies, we want to think clearly about these sort of claims and the arguments for them. Okay, so the central claim that we'll be considering is claim taxation is theft. So I'm going to say a little bit to clarify this claim before we get to the argument. First, let's interpret the word theft. Now, someone might get kind of
already we're
nitpicky
off
and
to a
say,
bad start.
well, technically,
Let's take into consideration what the word theft means. Yeah, that's not a good sign if you're already starting to play with the foundational concept, which makes up a very base, something that everyone understands and has a common understanding of. The only reason you would do that is if you're trying to engage in obscurantism, which, spoiler, that's exactly what he's doing.
I mean, defining your terms is going to be very useful. The thing is, though, what defines taxation and what defines theft, as you said, is very commonly understood. Theft is just the taking of property without its owner's consent, and taxation is just the appropriation of money by a government.
Well, there's no competing understanding of what theft means. That's the problem here. Even arguments that suggest things which we would disagree are theft are not disputing the meaning of theft. They're merely disputing whether or not you can rightfully demonstrate ownership of the real subject, which is what they are claiming it is theft to take or own.
Mm-hmm. Now let's continue.
Taxation isn't theft, it's extortion. So I'll just say that we're going to interpret the word theft in a broad sense, which encompasses extortion, right? So theft is sort of the illegitimate taking of something, where
all taking is, well, what do you mean by illegitimate there, bud?
It's kind of begging the question there, isn't it?
He's begging the question.
Yeah, if you're going to define your terms, I find it very strange you're not going to, define the main fucking point of the argument, which is legitimacy. How do you define something as ethically legitimate? Or is ethical philosophy even legitimate in the first place?
I doubt this is something that he even considers, despite the fact that this is clearly that he puts this forward as an attempt to break down taxation as theft and try to make a philosophical argument. The thing is, though, it kind of goes in a circle when he uses a or it starts to go into a loop when he starts using a definition that uses the term illegitimate when the question is entirely about legitimacy. At least the definition I use is quite closed and fairly simple.
Yeah,
I would
that's
think.
sketchy AF.
Where we need to sort of fill in the details about what makes it illegitimate. Furthermore, we're interpreting theft in the morally loaded sense as opposed to the purely legal sense. Right?
Morally loaded. Should I just keep going and see if he elaborates on this point?
Yeah, sure.
Right? So there are certain laws which purport to define what counts as someone's property, and taking stuff in a way that violates these laws could be considered theft, but in the purely legal sense, relative to the current laws. Now, to see that this is not necessarily the morally loaded sense, or the sense that matters when it comes to what we should and shouldn't do, is imagine an evil dictator who takes us over and successfully rewrites all our laws, and new laws he writes say that everything belongs to him. Well, clearly, to take stuff from this person would not constitute theft in the morally loaded sense, right?
So basically,
Although
he's establishing the distinction between ethical philosophy and the legislation of the government, which, correct, there is a difference between those two things. Did anyone else have anything to say? That's why I was pausing.
I'm trying to think if there is something really to add here. I mean, it is useful that he did distinguish them. However, I'm curious if he's going to try to put forward an argument that, well, taxation is legal, so therefore it's not theft.
Well, I mean, the problem is, though, now that he's made this distinction, the example he provided of an evil dictator taking over and it not the current state, and it not being illegitimate to steal his property as opposed to being legitimate to steal unethically taken property from the state which the dictator took over, there's no distinction that you can create with this standard which you've established. And that's kind of the problem with governments, is that there's no sort of truth claim behind any claim of any claim to legitimacy for the legislation which they force onto people. Even if you were to assume that, I mean, the only way that you could make this argument is if you assumed the social contract was legitimate. But yeah, we'll be going over that, I'm sure.
theft relative to the current laws, or the laws that that he just installed, it's not theft in the sense that matters when it comes to what we morally should and should not do. So what is this morally loaded sense? Well,
Also, he's
essentially,
using morality and ethical philosophy as if they're interchangeable concepts. So get ready later on for the inevitable is-ought correlation, falsely trying to claim that you can't have these ethical standards applied without a state, and therefore you need theft because you need the state. And I can't tell if you're being intellectually dishonest or you just genuinely believe this at this point.
I wouldn't be surprised if his understanding of morals and ethics is entirely plebeian. He doesn't know anything, and he's just going off of what he knows off the top of his head based on what he learned in social studies.
Calling anything plebeian, it reeks of R/Rick and Morty to me, so I don't know if I'm gonna go there. But yeah, for somebody who's deconstructing concepts in an attempt to try and steel man another argument or create a very robust argument, it's very strange that he doesn't get into an analysis of competing ethical philosophies or what even would be defined as legitimate for the sake of this argument.
Mm-hmm.
not just what the current laws regarding property rights are, but what the just laws are, or what the just system of property rights is. And clearly this claim, the central claim, taxation is theft, is invoking this morally loaded sense because, the current laws allow for taxation, but clearly taxation doesn't violate the current law. So what the claim is getting at is that taxation is a violation of the just system of property rights. Okay, I also want to clarify the scope of the claim, right? So the claim is not merely asserting that some taxation is theft, because this claim would be sort of too weak, too uncontroversial to be interesting. Pretty much everyone would accept that some form of taxation is theft, right? Again, if an evil dictator takes us over and demands a portion of our income to enrich himself and his friends, pretty much everyone would regard that as theft. So
Again, he's just building a straw man at this point.
Well, we do make the argument that all taxation is theft.
Yeah, I know. He's just
and
building, and that's what he's doing. He's building a straw man. Like, this hypothetical evil dictator will do this.
well,
So of
and,
course it's bad when he does it.
and this gets into what I was just saying earlier, where if you assume the state to be legitimate, you don't have an argument against coercion implemented by any type of state. Just saying, oh well, this state is dictatorial and mine is a good red-blooded constitutional Lockean Republican parliamentary intersectional democracy. There's no fundamental distinction between those two, which is why you have to separate ethical concepts from legal philosophy. I mean, ethical philosophy from the legislation imposed by the state. And once you do that, unless you have some sort of fundamental principled grounding for what actually provides a claim of truth to the legislation proposed by the state, then it's just an argument of might makes right in either case. So what separates a dictator from some fucking LGBTQAI democracy, motherfucker?
I don't know.
claim, it's trivial, it's not interesting. What we're interested in is the far stronger claim, the more controversial claim that all taxation is theft. Taxation, by its very nature, is theft.
I mean,
I just had a random thought. He's putting this forward as though the sum taxation is theft argument is refused simply because it's not controversial. It's not provocative enough.
so
No,
that's an appeal to popularity argument.
it is very much, it's structured in the same way. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same, but no, the reason that all taxation is theft is because we're putting forward an ethical argument, or rather an ethical observation. That the idea of some taxation is theft would violate the consistency principle and would therefore not work. All taxation is theft because
At what point do you determine that taxation is theft if the ethical legitimacy of taxation operates on a scale? Ethics on a scale does not work because there's nothing actually defining at what point it is or isn't legitimate, because the fact that it's on a scale implies that it can be at any point on that scale, and therefore your concept of ethics has a built-in truth, principled claim of truth for any point that the rate at which something happens on it exists on that scale.
and you would have to ask the question, like, let's take income taxes as one example. Is taxation theft at 15%? Yes. Then is taxation theft at 14%? No. Why not? What's the difference in that 1%? What makes that 1% so inherently important that it causes a significant moral change between 15% and 14%? What about 14.1%, 14.2%? And we can keep going.
Yeah.
It just
The problem with anything on a scale is, well, there's no point at which something is or stops being legitimate. But the other problem is that arguments which presuppose this, and I've pointed this out before, rely on a comparison to something else, even though that's not inherently implied in an ethical argument, in an analysis of an individual occurrence.
Mhm.
Even if the tax revenue goes towards what it's, supposed to, even if the proper democratic process is
What is it
followed.
supposed to go to?
Is he really changing? Is he really like not understanding what the taxation and theft argument means? It doesn't matter if taxation is being just burned in a giant hole out in the Nevada desert or going towards building, I don't know, a golden skyscraper. I don't care where it goes. The fact that it's being stolen from me at all indicates that there's a problem.
And he was just talking about, well, if it goes through the proper democratic process, then it's legitimate. That's sort of like you can play and
Yeah.
Even so-called ideal taxation is theft. Now, you might also consider a
what the hell is
restricted version of the
ideal taxation?
I don't know.
Yeah, see, this is that, it's that pseudo-intellectualism thing that I was talking about earlier. I mean, we're not even past the first fucking slide yet, and I think anybody who is watching this from an even, like, who understands basic argumentation would see that he's essentially picking and choosing which parts are strongly defined and which aren't. And that's just a recipe for, I'm going to be making conclusions which don't logically follow from the premise of my argument.
that says all taxation of a certain sort is theft. For instance, I can imagine there being lots of people who think, okay, maybe it's not the case that all taxation is theft, but all redistributive taxation is theft. So you might consider a claim like that. I think I will analyze that sort of claim in the argument.
Who makes the claim that some taxation is theft?
Yeah, and the other problem with that is, how do you define a redistributive tax if, as you defined taxes, well, you haven't laid out a definition in your slide here, but you mentioned earlier that there's a proper purpose for taxes. What exactly would separate a tax going to a proper purpose from a redistributive tax?
And even then, like wouldn't if we define redistribution as simply moving it from one place to another, that would mean that all taxation is redistributive.
That's what I was going to say, that all taxes are redistributive. It takes money from one person and puts it in the pockets of another.
Yeah, he seems to be under the impression that intentions and conclusions are somehow interchangeable. And I gotta tell you, a lot of skull-paved roads have been laid out on the idea of utopia, with the intention of utopia.
All right. Hey, by the way, I gotta jump off for a bit. Esso, can you control the video?
God damn it! I have to go in like 5 minutes. So
I don't think I'll be gone for 5 minutes.
how long will you be gone?
Probably 5 minutes.
Okay, I guess I can control this for a little bit.
All right. So yeah, I'll be back in a bit.
Is the stream gonna? Oh, okay.
Yeah, this stream will keep going.
Okay. Okay.
Stream's alright.
You're not leaving the call,
Stream's
so
alright.
we'll continue.
Yeah. But in this video, we're interpreting the central claim in the strongest way, it's asserting that all taxation is theft. So remember that I'm going to be considering an argument for...
Just very quickly, this is definitely an absolute. Let's make that fundamentally clear. There is no... This is a true dichotomy. That's the term that I was looking for. There's no way to argue that some taxation is theft or more taxation is theft than others, because ethical philosophies exist within true... Ethical dichotomies are inherently true dichotomies. But anyway, let's continue.
the
Oh, okay, somebody paused.
central claim. And I'm going to argue that the argument fails. Now, that doesn't mean that the central claim is false, although I do believe it's false.
Yes, it does. The argument fails. That doesn't mean that the claim is false. What? Bruh. Let's ask chat. Does that make sense to any of you? Since Filthy's gone and I don't have him to play off of.
Well, yeah. A, taxation involves people using threats or force to obtain something. A2, anything that involves people using threats or force to obtain something is theft. A3 is taxation theft. Yeah, that is actually true. That is a pretty convincing argument. So why is he trying to convince us that some taxation is not theft? He pretty much debunked himself right there.
It's the claim that it's false, but also the claim is true. Can't wrap my head around that. Okay, I'm interested to hear where he's going with that. That there exists. Since he's literally arguing that there exists something between true and false, when true and false are the only two possibilities. But go ahead, I'm listening.
Controversial, but if you refuse to pay your rent and the landlady comes to collect the rent, that's fine.
Yeah, here he goes, comparing taxation to rent. So basically, if taxation is like rent, does that mean the government owns a part of you and you're not in sole ownership of your entire ownership of yourself? Well, isn't that, type of partial slavery?
Yeah, the classic taxation is a fee argument. Well, the problem with this argument fundamentally is that it assumes that the burden of proof operates in the same way for all of these. It's a false comparison, basically.
Yeah.
Because these things which taxation is being compared to, it's a contractual arrangement, which means that there's cooperation between both parties, which means that fundamentally nobody is coercively claiming dominion over another person inherently as a result of that exchange. Now, there's a strong case, Mises himself in his book Socialism, and Rothbard in some of his earlier works, just to name some prominent philosophers people in the chat would be familiar with. They've made the case that the widespread difference between property owners and renters, the sort of disparity between them in terms of organization, influence over the organization that they have, is created through state finance manipulation and state policies which incentivize owners of property to organize in certain ways. And there's ample evidence to support this throughout history. Basically, what I'm saying is that, it's not an inherently coercive organization, but most rent and most landlord renting of land is incentivized by state means, and that organization exists because of some state policy.
All right, I'm back.
Hey, welcome back.
He's trying to compare taxation to other types of organizations such as rent. And you skipped ahead by a lot, so I don't know who just did that, but yeah, we're like 2 minutes ahead of where we were.
And
were
I said
right
that
here.
if taxation is rent, a type of rent, then he basically admits that the government owns your property. Thus, if you don't own your property, how is that true? How is that true self ownership of that property?
Well,
It's
sounds
even
like
it's even
socialism.
further than that actually, because if it were just property taxes that were being paid, then that would be one thing. But they don't just pay for property taxes. They pay you pay sales taxes, you pay car taxes, you pay income taxes, you pay social security taxes, payroll taxes. You get taxed for you get taxed at every level of production. The government taxes you after you die, which is basically quadruple taxation. There's taxes at every level of production. So you're not just paying for the right to live in what the government claims to be property. You're basically paying the government for the right to produce, to consume, to live, to own property, and you're paying the government for the privilege to die, which is inherently a claim to the government for all of those things.
yeah. Well, just the general problem that I was getting into with this argument is it assumes that the state it assumes by default that the state is it isn't a coercive association, or it assumes that the things which the state is being compared to are coercive associations, and those are premises which are not going to be expanded upon. And the problem with that, if it's the former, is that it's shifting the burden of proof. The burden of proof is on the state to justify its. Who keeps moving the fucking video ahead? It was like
906, that's where we were.
no, it was like right when this slide was pulled up. That's where we left off.
All right. I mean, when I got back here, it was 906. But I'm not touching it, so.
Yeah, let's play right here. Don't fucking move it forward again.
To make it better. So here is the first version, argument A. Premise 1, taxation involves people using threats or force to obtain something. Premise 2, anything that taxation is theft. Right, so here we have a valid argument. The premises entail the conclusion. The only question is, should we accept these premises? Premise 1 is pretty much uncontroversial. We all know what happens if you refuse to pay your taxes. There are certainly threats or force involved. Right?
So why are you disputing it?
Exactly. If force is used to obtain that money, then that's coercion, that's extortion, and thus it's theft. So, yeah.
I mean, he is correct that it's uncontroversial. So there's only two conclusions you can draw. Either one, that this is unethical, or actually no, there's only one conclusion you can draw, and you can make two judgments about it. It's unethical. So that's the case closed. So you can either take the rational route, which is that it's evil, it's immoral, it's unethical, so therefore you need to get rid of it. Or two, you can take the fascist route and just be like, yeah, but this is great because I like having people suffer and having their property taken from them.
If taxation is a threat of God damn it, who is doing that?
I think the video is just glitching out.
No, somebody keeps fucking like clicking a minute ahead of where we were.
What's going on? I don't know what's going on.
It's on his.
I haven't been touching anything.
We're gonna kick you if you don't stop. Okay, it's on the screen is on him. He's the one displaying the video. So if he was moving it ahead, we would be able to see his mouse clicking on the video. I'm not doing it, so if it must be you if it's not a glitch.
I haven't been doing anything.
Fucking god. Well, if you are, stop. So we were like 5 minutes. No, we were like right here. I'm gonna have it on the video.
Right,
So if
here we have
someone,
a valid argument.
so if someone does it again,
Premise
I'm
is
gonna
entailed
see you doing it.
conclusion. The only question is, should we accept these premises? Premise one is pretty much uncontroversial. We all know what happens if you refuse to pay your taxes. There are certainly threats or force involved, right? But the second premise is
Which means it's theft.
It's subject to some pretty compelling counterexamples. So let's look at a couple of these. If a worker does the agreed upon job and then the person refuses to pay them, well, if they use threats or force to obtain what they're owed, that's not theft, at least intuitively.
We already
If
went
you get
over that.
mugged and you're feeling brave, so you use threats or force to get your wallet back,
Why are you not pausing the video, or do you just not have anything to say?
Me?
Filthy. Where did he leave again?
Yeah, I think he left again. So I think just us.
No.
I've been here. It's just that I kept myself muted.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, I didn't know if you had anything to say to this because I mean, yeah, I'd already gone over this a second ago. His argument's premise assumes that taxation isn't coercive, which he'd established that it is. So he's claiming that these are coercive. So he's shifting the burden of proof, because these aren't examples of somebody coercing another person. These are examples of somebody using force to correct an act of aggression initiated upon them.
I also realized that there's a problem with the second premise that he presents. That anything that involves people using threats or force to obtain something is theft. But suppose that you make a threat to someone to give you something, like, I don't know, some idle threat. They say no, and you just go about your business. Since no actual changing of goods or services happened, could that be constituted as theft, or is that just force? Or is that just a threat?
And also, the use of the term force is a real problem here, too, because, it seems like a deliberate obfuscation of the actual libertarian argument, which is that things obtained through coercive means are not legitimately obtained, since they, in order to aggress upon another person, you are attempting to express dominion over them as moral agents or products of their agency, and there's no logically consistent manner by which you can do this.
Mm-hmm. And this is A2 can be answered pretty easily by the non-aggression principle, which is simply that you were talking about earlier, that these things don't exist in a vacuum. They're responses to either a breach of contract in the first example or retaliation against someone who initiated force against you. So by any ethical standard, those are completely justified. And they don't really constitute theft at all, but since, after all, theft occurred in the first place in the second example, or a breach of contract happened in the first one. So anyways, I'm continuing.
That's not theft, right? If your child gets kidnapped and you use threats or force to get reunited with your child, that's not theft.
Same thing as the second one.
A little bit more controversial.
Well,
but,
children aren't property,
if you-
so...
Don't tell that to the Rothbardians. I'm sorry, the late stage Rothbardians.
Yeah, Rothbard after 1985, but... Yeah. So that's the major difference between the third point and the others is
Yeah.
that he's assuming children are property, and no, that's not
And,
how it works.
Yeah, I'm
and
not
in the fourth example, that is again, that is breach of contract. So threats is there's no aggression taking place here.
That's the same as
Is
the
to pay
first two.
rent,
Pretty much.
and the landlady comes to collect the rent. She can use threats or force to obtain it, and that's not fair, right? There's some people who will reject this last counterexample because
Are you saying something?
Yeah, it's peculiar that he refers to the landlord as a landlady.
Trying to be inclusive.
Is that that's not the point that I was driving at. It's like there's a specific reason for doing that, since landlord is the more commonly accepted term to describe someone who's renting out land, and yeah, that is more. I don't know if that's going to be important later on, but I don't know. That's standing out to me, so I'm making note of it now.
they think charging rent is illegitimate. That's fine. I'm sure you're not going to reject the rest of these as counterexamples. So in each one of these cases, the person is using threats or force to obtain something.
Tuckerite
but
intensifies.
it doesn't-
Rent is illegitimate. Benjamin Tucker intensifies.
We just jumped ahead, and I didn't see who did it.
Yeah, I didn't see either, so it might be a glitch.
Who is pressing play?
I'm not. It's not playing on my end, so.
Who will reject this last counterexample because they think charging rent is illegitimate, but it doesn't constitute theft. So clearly, we have to revise the argument to fix this problem. So here's the second version of the argument B. Premise 1, taxation involves people using threats or force to obtain something that they have no right to obtain. Anything that involves
That's
people using
the same
threats or
as the
force to
first
obtain-
argument.
He seems to be blithely ignoring property rights and how property rights work.
Yeah, because from the actual libertarian philosophical perspective, these two things are fundamentally the same.
Yeah.
Someone just skipped ahead again, so I'm going back.
People using threats or force to obtain something that they have no right to obtain. Anything that involves people using threats or force to obtain something that they have no right to obtain is theft. So taxation is theft. So I've underlined the added components here, right? So B2 now avoids those counterexamples, right? So here we have the counterexamples. In each one of these cases, the person using threats or force to obtain something has a right to obtain it. Again, if you reject the rent one, that's fine. You can leave that one out. But in at least the other cases, the person has a right to obtain it.
Well, it just begs the question, why does the government have the right to your money?
Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar and maybe watching for the first time, hello, but yeah, the actual libertarian principle explaining why, the reason why we're against theft, why we're against the state's existence, why we're against state property, everything to do with the state. The principle which defines that is the definition of moral agency. As a moral agent, I am entitled to myself and everything which is which I can prove to be an extension of my agency, which essentially extends to all unowned resources and all the products of the things which I've created. and everything, all of my voluntary associations with other moral agents, by trying to forcibly claim a stake over something which is a product of someone else's agency or someone else just in general. By coercing them, I am claiming to dominion over them. And the problem that creates is it creates the question of, how do I demonstrate ownership over someone who is a moral agent, someone who owns their own agency and the products of them? And there's no consistent way to explain how this is the case. Lagging really bad on my end, so I don't know what it was like for you guys just a second ago, but
Yeah, it was. I didn't hear anything.
I
So
didn't
wait a
hear
moment, and I'm going to start playing now.
To do so is not theft. However, notice that in adding this revision to both premises, the first premise has now become controversial. Okay? Before, it just asserted that there's threats and force involved, which is obviously true. And so using threats and force to do so is not theft. However, notice that in adding this revision to both premises, the first premise has now become controversial, right? Before, it just asserted that there's threats, or a lot more controversial than it was before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this argument one more time, and I'm going to isolate the controversial component, just so we can think about it on its own, get real clear on what it takes for this argument to succeed. So here we have the third and final version of this argument.
Hold up.
C,
Can we pause it?
premise one.
I did. It just said it hasn't paused on your end.
Okay, well, what I was going to say is, it seems that he's identified that if you assume that that the state isn't legitimate, or you assume that the underlying sort of principles which make up libertarian philosophy aren't legitimate, and you don't conceptually understand those arguments, then you're never going to be able to process information in a way which allows you to come to that conclusion. So I'll give him props for at least understanding that the real discussion of whether or not taxation is theft is a discussion of philosophy and principles, which is farther than most people get.
Mm-hmm. That is true. However, I'm curious as to why, at least in the previous slide, he was concerned about B1 being controversial. I'm sincerely hope, I don't know, because I haven't seen the video yet, of course, but I sincerely hope he's not going to try to make an appeal to the crowd fallacy, where things are only ethically or morally true or not, because the majority of people agree to follow them as some sort of normative standard. I sincerely hope that's not going to be the case, but I'm kind of expecting it now.
Filthy robot. You're roboting really hard at the beginning and the end of that statement.
Ah, frickin' hell. So let me try that again. I think he's going to
He's transforming.
Have I achieved my final form yet?
Robots in disguise.
Well, he is a lizard person.
Now you're roboting. Am I roboting?
No, you're fine.
Domo
Okay.
arigato, Mr. Roboto.
Why is everyone except for me roboting?
All right. Do I sound better now?
It's on your heady, so just kidding.
Honestly, it might be on his end. You sound fine to me.
Yeah, you sound fine too. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, the video just quit. Did he have to leave?
Oh, it didn't just quit. I just
Oh, there we go.
got it away. I just tabbed out of it. So, anyways, I think I'm just going to continue what I was saying before. That there's no real reason why a problem, why a statement being controversial would otherwise change its validity. We don't alter how we don't alter entire maps or flight courses of airplanes because we're not entirely sure what shape the Earth is. Otherwise, the globe Earth understanding would be falsified by the simple existence of people who believe in the Velociraptor Earth theory.
Right.
So it being simply controversial makes no sense. Whether people disagree or not doesn't change questions of right and wrong. And if he's going to try to make the appeal that these ethical arguments are ethical only because people agree with them, well, that makes no sense. And ultimately, yeah, he
Yeah,
doesn't really have
exactly.
anything to
Like,
go
a lot of
on.
people would hold it controversial in that abortion should be criminalized, but that doesn't exclude the fact that abortion is wrong because you don't have self ownership to the life that's inside the womb.
It's not your life to dispose of. Just because you
Exactly.
disagree doesn't mean it's not right. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. And I just realized that without ESO, we have no way of being able to play audio, except I can unmute this thing. And unfortunately, yeah, the rest
Yeah,
of
but
this
we still
stream
have a
won't be
problem
able
with the
to.
video being way out of sync.
It's not the problem
between
that the problem is not that it's out of sync. The problem is that yeah, the rest of the stream probably won't be able to hear it. I don't know. Let me just play a little bit and see if they can hear it.
Nope, completely silent. There's not much to say other than we can see what he's showing on the screen. But
Chat, can you hear it when I play it?
all right, chat, time for you to get involved. Can you hear anything?
Oh, they can hear us just fine. The question is, like, can you hear the video when I play it? No, it doesn't look like they can.
Oops.
Friggin' hell. All right, well, I do have one idea, and that is to...
Can you play it through your mic?
yes, that's exact. Actually, I was thinking of playing it through my speakers. So I'm going to need to change how the thing works for a minute here.
Okay, Neil Stone says, try using captions and reading it to us. No, that's a terrible idea.
It probably is, because now they can hear you through my mic too. Yeah, we're getting some technical difficulties here. All right, so I think we'll just end the stream here.
Really?
Yeah, we'll
Well,
probably try to
anything
go.
else you do? Well, anything else you want to talk about?
Well, let me see here. I haven't really prepared much in the way of news topics, and I haven't really checked the news all that much.
Well, yeah, I haven't really checked much on it. And well, the UK is finally leaving the European Union, but that's not much of a change. What else? The coronavirus is being blasted way out of proportion. It's just the flu, and yet the news media is treating it like the worst thing ever.
I mean, there is some merit to it. I mean, I said that before, but I've been seeing story after story of story after story after story of what's actually going on in Wuhan, China, and it's like apocalyptic.
Exactly.
Like,
They locked the entire city of millions of people inside this. No one will enter. No one can leave. It is something out of some sort of sci-fi film.
however, communication is getting out. People in Wuhan, they talk about how going down the street, it's like living in a ghost city. China, get it? But
Go see. Yeah.
and yeah, like there are lots of people who are being infected.
Oh man. And I've heard there's more people infected than the SARS outbreak at its peak.
Yeah, and I remember SARS was blown way out of proportion. There's
Exactly.
also the problem of the fact that it's actually a lot more dangerous than the regular flu. Not to mention
Well,
that there's
I'm
even
not too worried about it
indications.
because I've had the flu a couple times. You get diarrhea, you sometimes vomit, but you don't die from it.
Well, you do. It's just that only if the symptoms are not treated. Typically, it's dehydration that kills you, not like the complications from flu, not the flu itself. But that said,
I mean, it can kill the elderly, but not,
mhm,
probably not a spry 25-year-old like me. Oh, I
you're
just
fine.
turned 25. It's my birthday today. Happy
Oh, happy
birthday to
birthday!
me.
Yeah. So,
So,
anyways, also there's the fact that the indications that the Chinese government is disposing of bodies and cremating them before they can be reported as a fatality in order to keep the actual death numbers down. Now, whether or not that's actually a significant, statistically significant alteration to the data or not, I don't know. However, I think it does show that this thing actually should be worth paying attention to. Now, a whole bunch of people are saying that this is the Black Swan event that's going to ultimately take down the Chinese, if not the global economy. I don't know because we've had pandemics like this before in memory. There's the aforementioned SARS. There's swine flu. I'm sure I saw people in the chat actually remember that one. I remember that one very specifically. And I only remember it because everyone in my school, everyone was so excited for the idea of school being closed down because of the possibility of a swine flu outbreak. It never actually happened. I mean, the school didn't close because of it, but yeah, people were excited because we were hearing stories about that happening. And
everyone's
no,
in the chat's
JC,
wishing me happy birthday. Thanks, guys. It's much appreciated.
and
Anyway,
and no, the Chinese government is not cremating bodies to prevent them from rising up as zombies. It's not that kind of outbreak. Calm down.
well, coronavirus does sound like something the Umbrella Corp would come up with.
Well, the
To be
Umbrella Corp
honest.
did come up. The Umbrella Corp did come up with it. I mean, no one's entirely sure where the coronavirus came from. However, what we do know is that several U.S. pharmaceuticals have a patent for coronavirus DNA and just the coronavirus structure in general, to say nothing of the fact that there were several components of the coronavirus that strongly suggest that it's a hybrid of several other viruses. For example, I saw a story, or I got linked to a story about how the coronavirus has a component in it that's found in the HIV virus.
So it's some sort of weird mutant chimera virus.
Yeah, and of course, chimeras hybridization and chimerization doesn't really happen in nature, especially to the extent that the coronavirus is, which strongly suggests that someone put it together deliberately. Now, why they would do that, I don't know. It's entirely possible that the Chinese government simply needed to enact some form of population control. I
Or
can
it could have
definitely
been
see some.
Or it could have been active state-sponsored biological terrorism from, let's say, the United States. The United States has been in a bit of a trade rivalry with the Chinese for a long time now, and they needed to create a certain leverage, so to speak.
Yeah, and I know, however, I know that there's one theory that there was a important person in a Canadian pharmaceutical in a level 4 lab, which if you aren't aware, a level 4 laboratory or a level 4 biological research lab is like the highest level of security. That's like where you want to research some of the most contagious and deadly diseases humanity has ever known, including Ebola. They go to like extensive lengths to make sure that when people go in and when they come out, they are completely sterile. And you literally can't go in without basically wearing a spacesuit.
Whoa.
But in one lab, in one of those level 4 labs in Canada, there was a Chinese national who was apparently fired and then went back to China. And it's believed that that's where the coronavirus originated from, that they were doing research on splicing certain genes together to create some kind of superbug, and that he managed to smuggle it out of Canada. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't know. It's entirely possible that the coronavirus was deployed specifically to allow for China to, or to make it easier for China to control their population. Because, as I'm sure you're aware, when you have a very large population, you have a lot of economic activity that requires an exponentially larger government in order to be able to police absolutely everyone. And a larger government is more expensive, exponentially more expensive, and less sustainable. I mean, we already know that China is a massive, massive house of cards economically as it is. So,
Yes, but no, I think the exact opposite is happening, in that this coronavirus is causing a lot more political instability than what the communist government is really wanting right now, because they're already having serious protests down in Hong Kong and Macau right now. And so having this coronavirus to deal with is something that really makes trying to clamp down on these the certain social unrest even that more difficult, because now you have to keep a virus under control they can barely see, that's smaller than that can bypass all the quarantines, and you don't know when, and you don't even feel the symptoms even when you're infected until weeks later.
It's a incubation. It has an incubation period of 14 days, during which you're still contagious, which is actually most terrifying of all. And of course, you can genetically engineer viruses and other contaminants to have incredibly long, what are they called, incubation periods.
Right.
And that's, yeah, as I said, that just makes it absolutely more terrifying.
So yeah, speaking of Hong Kong, what's your opinion on the protests going on down there? Are they truly spontaneous, or do you think the U.S. is backing, like the Chinese is accusing them of being?
I mean, I don't think that they're being backed. We know that they're being backed. We have a paper trail. We know full well that, yeah, the United States is doing this specifically to cause instability in China, to distract them, to harm them economically. And it goes to that saying that the U.S. is almost certainly using its alphabet soup intelligence agencies in order to smuggle material, personnel, supplies, and all sorts of other wonderful things that the Hong Kong protesters are going to be using. And it's almost certainly being inserted in through some kind of black market system. They did something very similar in the 80s or in the 70s. No, it was not in the 70s. It was in the 80s during the tail end of the Soviet Union, when the Polish Solidarity anti-communist movement was supplied by the CIA through the Israelis and the Catholic Church. And no, I'm not making that up.
The Catholic Church was involved in smuggling weapons to the Solidarity movement that brought down the Warsaw Pact?
Not weapons, but communications equipment and communication supplies. But yes, the Catholic Church was directly involved in it. Plus, the Pope John Paul II was specifically recruited by the Reagan administration to speak out against the Soviet Union, which it shouldn't have been that hard to convince him, because Pope John Paul II was Polish. But yeah, that's something that actually happened. So it goes without saying that the CIA has supported. Now, from what I can tell, the Polish Solidarity movement was a grassroots uprising, and I don't think this is the case with this is the case with the Hong Kong protesters. It could be, I don't know, but they're definitely being supplied. They're definitely being supported by the U.S. government, and it is definitely done as a kind of a middle finger to China.
It's a much needed middle finger, but still
I mean, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. China totally deserves it, but we shouldn't be under the mistaken impression that this is a question of good versus evil. It's just evil versus a different kind of evil. And you can see this when the Hong Kong protesters, what do they want? Freedom? Do they want individual liberty, sovereignty, property rights? No, they want democracy, as though somehow that makes things better.
Well, yeah, like we discussed earlier, democracy is a form of mob rule. Two wolves and a sheep voting what to have for lunch. That's
Pretty
democracy.
Much. Yes. And even then, like, it's not even what they're going to get is not even democracy. It's going to be the kind of quasi-fascistic pseudo-democracy that we have today, where people don't really vote on what's going to be, or what policies or what legislation is going to be passed or enforced. It's going to be one of two pre-selected candidates who are presented as representatives who are going to be ultimately deciding on what rules and what restrictions are going to be put into place. Now, of course, they're going to present that as democracy, but no, it's not.
And could you explain to any new viewers why direct democracy is bad?
It's the same problem that you were talking about earlier. The problem that you have is that you have two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner, as you said earlier.
Right.
It's entirely a problem of majorities, or more accurately, pluralities, deciding to impose their will upon other people. And you end up with the situation of society cannibalizing itself as they use the mechanisms of the central authority meant to carry out the will of the plurality as a weapon to be used against their enemies. And of course, loyalties and alliances fluctuate violently and constantly. You end up with a very, very unstable society. People point to the Athenian democracy as some kind of great success, but if I recall correctly, it didn't even last. It didn't even last a century. I think it only lasted. Oh crap! I forgot what the actual number is, but it didn't last long at all.
And on top of that, they also owned slaves, a ton of slaves.
Yes, they did, and yeah, and also I think historically, the period of Athenian democracy was probably one of the most oppressive times in ancient Athens history.
I know Plato or Aristotle even commented on how tyrannical Athenian democracy was. It was just, he considered it one of the worst forms of government he ever experienced in his writings.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Or was it Plato?
I think it would have been Plato, actually. He would have been a lot more involved in that, and he also personally suffered as a result of, well, the Athenian government. If you believe that the dialogues are accurate descriptions of reality and not just fictional stories, then Socrates was murdered by the democracy because he said things that the government didn't like.
Exactly.
He was starting to question the gods of the state, and so therefore he was forced to commit suicide. It was either him or his family.
Yeah, and I think in ancient Greece, people committed suicide by eating hemlock. Sort of. I don't think that's related to anything, but just as a quick trivia. It's a type of, I think it's from a certain bush. But anyways, Plato, I would say I do agree with a lot of what he says about democracy, but I'm kind of hearing my own voice through your mic. Could you turn your speakers down a bit?
That's not possible. I have headphones in.
Oh, I don't know what's echoing.
Do you have the stream playing on another tab?
No, I don't think so. I have the Watch Together tab open.
Huh. Yeah, well, feel free to close that now. We're not going to be
All
going
right.
back to that.
Yeah, there's change of plans. So there's just two of us. But Plato also said that government goes in cycles, that it starts at aristocracy, then devolves to oligarchy, then evolves to democracy, then it falls to mob rule, and then devolves into tyranny, and then goes all the way back to aristocracy. What do you think about that? Does everything just go in a big cycle from the most state to the anarchy and then back to statism again? Is it all cyclical?
No. I mean, this is basically dialectics. It's dialectical and historicist, which if you don't know what that means, it's the argument that society progresses along several stages of political organization. You can see this with Marx's idea of dialectical materialism. That's what the term is. And what he argued is that society is, instead of going in a cycle, is going on a linear progression from primitivism to feudalism to capitalism to socialism to communism. Now, of course, this is completely inaccurate, both from a historical perspective and from what we can observe in today's reality. I mean, his belief that capitalism, whatever that means, has all sorts of
he has it all backwards.
contradictions.
In fact, when you look back in history, the most primitive societies were communistic. If you looked at the pre-Columbian Native American tribes, they were very communal in their living. But as societies become more advanced, there needs to be then the state take control, and things become more stratified as time marches on.
Well, what happens is that as society progresses, they need more advanced forms of exchange. If you have a society of like 100 people, a bartering system could work pretty well. But as people become more specialized, as you have more division of labor, you end up with increasing problems of the double coincidence of wants. Which, just to explain that briefly, suppose that you are specialized in producing apples, but you want oranges. So you go to take your apples to the person who has oranges, but he doesn't want apples. He wants potatoes. And you go to the person who wants potatoes, or who has potatoes, but he doesn't want your apples. He wants chickens. And so you have to continue along that chain until you eventually get to someone who wants your apples, and then you exchange those goods all the way back to the person who wants oranges, and that's how you get what you want. Obviously, that is extremely, extremely inefficient. So what people do is they stockpile a good or service that people universally want. This can be anything, and has taken multiple forms throughout history. Salt, rice, sand dollars, butter. Did I say salt? Nails.
You said salt, yes.
Yeah, gold and silver. Any sort of goods and service that has basically universal exchange value and can be easily divided. And that's how we get currency, or rather, that's how we get money. It's just a universal medium of exchange that has value beyond its utility. And so this is this problem of an increasingly complex economy is already going to be solved.
And speaking of currency, I've heard people are starting to trade in their money for gold at an alarming rate because of this. The crisis this coronavirus is causing, the sort of weird economic panic, and rightfully so. They should be investing in precious metals because they have more lasting value than fiat currency, which is always being devalued by constant inflation caused by the state.
Actually, let me check something. I'm just going to check the prices on the precious metals real quick because I'm kind of curious.
Price of gold is shooting through the roof right now.
Price of gold, yeah, it definitely seems to be going up. Silver is skyrocketing. Platinum is cratering, and I don't know why. Palladium seems to be holding steady, but it shot up
Palladium
recently for no reason, or at the very least, a reason I'm not personally aware of.
So, what do you think about people investing their money in precious metals rather than cryptocurrency?
I say do both.
Do both?
Yeah. I mean, what's going to end up happening is that while we transition from a state of stated coerced society into a free society, there's going to be a lot of instability. And gold and silver are still going to be valued both for their ornamental and electronic value. So having that on hand as a medium of exchange will definitely help you get through the times. And cryptocurrency, I mean, that's going to be the new medium of exchange following society stabilizing again. It's going to be able to retain its value. It has scarcity. So I strongly suggest people, yeah, get both.
All right.
I have both.
You have gold?
Yes, I have silver. I have I have both.
I've been trying to find gold. I mean, I live in a very gold-rich area. I've been paying for it out of a river illegally, but like, if I care what the state wants, if I want to find gold in the river, I have every right to do so.
Have you found any?
Not yet. I'm not very that experienced in panning. I've heard you need more specialized equipment to sift through the constant sand, and then through sifting through that sand, then you have to put it in the pan. Then you sort of sift through that, and then you can find the gold nuggets. I'm not sure if have you ever panned for gold before?
I have not.
It's really tedious, but very rewarding when you find some.
Excellent. Well, yeah, by all means, keep doing that. I'm
It's
probably
winter
doing it the
now.
wrong
I
way.
can't pan for gold yet, but when it starts to warm up in the summer, I'll definitely try panning for more. I just hope I don't get caught. But I never got caught. It's not really that enforced. The water is super cold, so you gotta wear gloves.
Of course.
So are you watching the Super Bowl this Sunday?
Of course not. I could care less.
You don't like football?
I mean, I'm not really interested in sports at all.
No sports?
No. I mean,
Really?
I can stand to watch it, but it's not really something that's really interested me. I find it very repetitive.
Not even the extreme sports?
I mean, they can be fun to watch, but
Oh.
beyond that, like, no, I won't really go out of my way to watch them. The most fun sport to watch, in my opinion, is hockey.
Oh yeah, hockey is awesome. I mean, I'm from Minnesota, and we're just crazy for hockey up here.
But beyond like affiliating yourself with a specific team in a geographical location, I can't really get invested in it. I can definitely see why people like it, and I know people, mostly my own family, who like it. But yeah, oh, Esso's back.
Oh, Esso's back. Hey, Esso.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know what the fuck happened, but for like the last half hour, my internet's been down.
Oh boy.
oh, what happened? Was there just a blackout?
I don't know. You guys started roboting, and then my fucking internet went down.
Yeah, I thought it
So
was on your end.
I figured, oh, my internet went down, so I guess I'll go eat dinner. That's also where I've been.
All right. Well, you're probably gonna wrap up the stream soon anyway.
Okay.
We'll probably
Well,
end up finishing, like, doing more on that video next stream.
Yeah,
because
you
there's
guys
really
are
more to
still,
talk about.
you guys are still roboting incomprehensibly, but I made the last part out pretty clearly. There's nothing more to talk about. And yeah, I was like, even before I got kicked off, I was noticing we were kind of running into a wall with subject matter. And that's sort of the problem with these arguments, is they don't tend to go very far. That's because you can't really go very far without, running into there are only so many logical problems that you can make in trying to say that taxation is not theft.
So it's a very predictable. You could tell in sort of the foundation they're laying for their argument, the direction that they're going to try and go with it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it seemed like his argument was going to be, well, you can, or I mean, you can. These groups are individuals, or these groups are entities, and they have property.
Even if that
seemed
were true, I didn't agree to be on their property, and so they don't have the right to demand payment from me. And
Oh,
he left
he's
again.
left again. He's been having internet problems, so I don't
Yeah, I
blame
guess
him.
so. I mean, it goes beyond even property rights, since they don't only have a claim to the property, but they have a claim to your work. They have a claim to the goods that you consume, the ability to consume them, the right to have or to continuously hold on to property, the right to die. So
I would
the only
agree
way
with
they
that
can really
more.
justify all the forms of taxation that they take is if they have a claim to literally every minute aspect of your existence.
They can even tax you as soon as you're born.
They probably
Because I
can.
had a mutual fund tied to my name, signed from my grandma, and they taxed me for it since it was meant for me until it matured. And so I had my parents steward that account for me while it was being taxed in my name. That is really screwed up that you can tax an infant like that.
I mean, when has the government ever actually cared about you? They just want the money. They just want the resources. That's all.
Exactly, but yeah, they can tax you as soon as you're born.
Hmm. But anyways, I think we should wrap this up.
Well, okay.
I agree. Astartes. I look forward to watching the state burn.
Well, I don't want to watch the state burn. I just want it to slowly go to sleep so we can enjoy our party in peace. The state is
If you
like
can,
a annoying 70-year-old uncle who won't shut up about back in my day.
no, it's not a 70-year-old uncle because the 70-year-old uncle doesn't coerce you, doesn't tax you, doesn't violently oppress you and restrict your ability to, do most things. But
But
whether it burns or fades away, I just want it gone. That's all I care about.
right. And if
Anyways,
one of you want to find where my YouTube channel is, you can find me at XBL Spartan X170 on YouTube.
yeah. All right. Thanks for stopping by.
And
And
it was nice talking to you, Heretic.
yes. And let's see. Happy birthday.
Hmm.
And I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.